We are live.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Do you want to promote your business on Zambia Blog Talk Radio? Yes, that's right. Live on Zambia Blog Talk Radio. To book your spot, just make a donation by picking from the following categories. To get started, just call or WhatsApp the number on the screen and you'll be good to go. Live on Zambia Blog Talk Radio every Saturday for 1 full month. And it will stay on the recorded shows.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is Saturday, February the 5th. Amazing, Roger. We are already saying February. Yeah? Time is really flying. We do thank you for joining us. Yeah, from wherever you are watching us from. Good afternoon, Lusaka. Hello, Europe. Good evening, the Western Pacific. There are people out there. My cousin is just about to go to bed, but Kasuluba, he has to look at my handsome face before he sleeps. Welcome, everybody, to the show. We have a great discussion for you today. We are looking at Zambia's economic outlook, and we'll be introducing our guest momentarily here as we get to the show. For those of you, you've seen the banner there that we just did. If you'd like to showcase whatever you are doing, a new product, your company has been in existence for a long time, maybe you've stagnated, you want to reach a global community, Zambia Blog Talk Radio, we can do some promos for you here. Not for much. We are not really calling it advertising. We just want you to make a contribution, and then we shall get to that. All right, let's get into our discussion here. First, I'll introduce our guest, then acknowledge my co-hosts. Mr. Chibamba Kanyama is not a stranger to all of us. He's a Zambian corporate governance trainer, public speaker, communication specialist, and strategist. He's a published author and journalist. Most of us will remember him from ZNBC when he was Director General. He also worked at the International Monetary Fund as Communications Director. He is currently managing consultant at Bridges Limited. Mr. Chibamba Kanyama, welcome and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you so much to the other hosts on your panel.
Excellent. My co-hosts from the United Kingdom, Chiiwe Tandi Chihana. Hi, Tandi.
Hello, Mr. Nathan. Kama, how are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. It's always a joy to have you. And my co-host, Kasuluba Mashonga, he did a good job in my absence last week. It's a sign that is ready to take over when I retire. Hi, Kasuluba.
Hi, Uncle Nathan. How are you?
I am doing good. It's our guest. We're glad you're joining us, Mr. Kanyama. On a light, have you watched any African Cup of Nations games?
I have watched part of it, not much of the games.
Okay.
I think I've been disappointed with maybe the video, what do you call that, VAR or something? Some of the decisions that were made, I thought, well, I don't like red cards for players, so that puts me off.
Oh, you don't like red cards? Okay. Interesting. Okay, I just wanted to find out whether you've managed. We shall talk about. I shall ask you that as a final question at the end of our discussion.
Not a problem.
Okay, please tell us about the services Bridges Limited offers and when it was incorporated or when it was started.
Yeah, Bridges Limited is an old company. It was incorporated in 2006, but has not operated because I kept, every time I would want to run it, one company wants me very desperately. I ended up with Sub Miller from Zambia State Insurance Corporation. They offered me something. And later on, I found myself back to the NBC. And just there, the IMF wanted me. I had to go to the IMF. But at one moment, I always forget this date, 2nd December 2015. I just realized it was high time to do something. It was a painful decision to make at the time. I called my family and told them this is the decision we are making. And shockingly, my wife accepted this time. I'm shocked. And this was the time I was earning the highest salary of my life, and we are in Washington, D.C. And I'm making this decision that I'm not getting any younger. And I don't want to retire being known as a Mr. Former this, former that, the way you're introducing me here. I want to be founder and leave a legacy for my children. And at that point, I knew my firstborn child was about to finish university.
Yes.
My second-born son was about to finish university. I said, I don't want them to go and hunt for a job. It is their choice to work where they want to work, but I should establish something where they work. Unfortunately, and 2 years later, 2017 January, I was back in Zambia and starting Bridges Limited 2017. And my firstborn son, our head of research and projects, doing an incredible job. So he develops strategic plans for different companies. He's head of a team. Right now, just finished the strategic plan for PIA, and next week they should be finishing for WAMA. They are working on CHARS, and another team is working on cabinet office change management for centralization. We have a number of projects, and then we have a training wing of the company, which is headed by another lady called Janet Mafulirwa. So she and myself and other members of the team, we are involved in training. We have trained Bank of Zambia for a period of 1 year. All the senior management at Bank of Zambia. We trained Yes. We just are starting a 6-month project of change management and cultural change for ZCCMIH, which is for 5 months project. So, and we have a lot of others. These are 1 week, 3-week training programs of capacity building for both private companies as well as the public sector. And strategy is a long list of them. ZRA strategy, we did it. We did strategy for NIMA. We did strategy for Zamra. We did strategy for Comesa. We have done quite a lot. So in a nutshell, that is what we do. We are just getting another line of business, which is fund management.
Very busy.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that, what word can I use, Tandy here? It's good to know that a Zambian company or a local brand run by a son of the soil is busy, booming, because most of the time we tend to look to foreign international companies to do the things that you have outlined. Absolutely. One of the challenges that our country faces, of course, it's unemployment. And you just told us you took a giant step, if I may use that expression, to leave regular employment. You even have gone to the extent of saying when you were getting your highest salary, that's when you left. It takes a lot to do that. There are young people listening to this show or watching this. They're going to watch a recorded show. This thing, Mr. Kanyama, of stepping out to do your own thing, what does it take? One of the challenges, of course, is the issue of capital. What do I do?
I think for me, I may not be the best example for young people because I worked for a long time for different organizations. And I used that opportunity to mobilize capital to start my company. So I invested quite much in Bridges. So that capital came from the companies I worked for. So I was able to build collateral, build property, and that's the property if I want to use it. Though I once used one of them to get a bank loan, but I've since paid the bank loan. So I can use property if I want more capital right now. But that collateral was built when I was working. So I planned that let me use the window of working to get 2 things. One, to learn how these companies run business. So even if I was a manager, I see a director at Zambia State Insurance Corporation, at Submiller, IMF, ZNBC. I was also looking at the systems, the operating mechanism, how they make money, particularly Zambian breweries, because they are in the business. Those are not joking. They are serious business. And I said, let me not focus so much on the money, the salary they are paying me, not even for the gratuity I'll get at the end of the day. Let me first of all see what skill am I going to get from these companies, which I can then in life use for my own business. And it is paying off now. It's really paying off in a very big way. And of course, the salary they are paying me, the gratuity, that is what I used for the capital. So I may not be a very good example for those who haven't worked, but I also find it good for young people who have not worked for anybody. The reason being, when you have not worked and earned a salary, it's very easy for you to sacrifice and take that chance in enterprise because your opportunity cost is very low and you have got nothing to benchmark against in terms of lost income. I should admit that I don't earn as much. I'm on a salary and I don't earn as much as what I was earning, for example, at the IMF. But when I look at the overall income that the business makes, it's a huge income. That is more than what I was earning when I was at the IMF. The only difference is that I have got 15 employees who are full-time and 8 other associates who also more or less like work for Bridges Limited. So I have over 20 people who get paid every month for working for Bridges Limited. And we are growing this year to make far, far more income. Now, for young people who haven't worked before, they haven't owned a personal to hold a car, they haven't had top-time allowances or fuel allowances and huge salary. So for them, they got nothing to compare that. Look, I wish I continued working because they haven't worked before. So they can start small and begin to build on that small to become the ShopRites of 10 years from now.
To follow up on that, and that's very insightful. I was just wondering then, when you refer to those that haven't yet had a footing in work and employment, what sort of startup support mechanisms are there that are available to young people, initial capital to invest in something that they'll want to get on with?
The first capital I call it borrowed credibility. I remember being asked a question. I was at Brentwood STA one time. I was speaking to a conference of mainly young people there. And one young man asked me a question, where do I find capital? How do I start? I said, look at the front bench here in the church. The front bench had one member in the audience who was a judge of the, what do we call the other court, which looks at Constitutional Court.
Constitutional Court.
A judge of the Concord is a member of that church. I said, you know what, young man, you can leverage your name. I said, Judge, do you mind if this young person here can use you when he's marketing his business? That, by the way, Judge so-so, Justice so-so knows me very well and he can be my reference. We call that borrowed credibility. Borrowed credibility is where you anchor yourself among people with high reputation who are respected in the market, and you have a connection with them. They can vie for you, they can speak for you, and you can even start supplying. Because the first business I encourage young people to do, apart from the IT business now, where you don't need much capital, you are selling a service where capital outlay is very low. You start with a business where the capital outlay is low. Now, trading is where you can simply use some little capital and begin to expand it slowly. And at times you find there's a very big order for you. You don't have enough capital to get to pay the supplier. You can now use borrowed credibility. You go to the judge and say, Judge, you are a member of my church, you are my senior, and I have this big order which I can fulfill. Are you able to speak for me to the supplier? Because you are known. You cannot default in your. Do you trust me enough? And if the judge may say, I trust you enough. And I don't have collateral, Judge. I don't have collateral. All I have is I'm a member of your church and you know me, and I'll make sure I protect you. If the judge trusts you, and you got credibility. So the first investment really is your credibility, and you can use your personal credibility to hook in with somebody. You can ride on the back of somebody who is known on the market, and the supplier will give you 30 days credit to get those products, and you sell and you pay back. That is how many of the young entrepreneurs started. They didn't have capital, but they live by the word. Somebody defended them. They got things on order on credit. They supplied. They were not excited with the money they made. They went back to the supplier and said, look, I borrowed this much last month. Yes, I've come to pay. And they began to grow and grow and grow. To me, that is the main thing away from just having money.
Thank you.
Interesting point that you raised there. One of the issues that I really want us for you to try and belabor here and help us understand is this issue of living within our means. All of us can identify with that. Our parents said it when we walked into ZCBC in our time. You point to the shelf and say, Dad, can I have that? And he says, no, we can't afford it. I don't know whether Kasuluba knows what ZCBC is.
He doesn't. I was thinking of that.
Okay, that was the ShopRite of our time, Kasuluba, when we were growing up.
Okay.
Mr. Kanyama, we are always growing up with this message of learn to live within your means. Why don't our governments live within its means or their means? Because the reason I'm saying that is that we have seen these reports about ZRA bragging about meeting their huge targets. Government has got many sources of income, services provided, different types of licenses, the list goes on. Why doesn't our government live within its means?
Partly it's a legacy issue. Legacy issue is that once you sustain a certain mode of behavior, it is very difficult to manage it. Once it becomes a habit, once it gets entrenched as a culture, as a system. I'll give you an example. The new president, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, has come up with some frugal means of managing costs to be able to live within means.
Yes.
And part of that deals with the public service. That I'll be traveling with very lean staff. I want to be carrying impressed. I don't need it. We want to be staying long. But the culture of the civil service is that many of the people who work for the civil service realize that their salaries are low. But these are among the top technocrats we have in the country. These can work globally like you are out there, but they have chosen to work for the public service, largely because they are incentivized. There is an incentive in the public service, which is more than the paycheck. They're traveling. And I know, even the trip in Addis Ababa, that there are people who traveled, who shouldn't have traveled. They have traveled, and they traveled as advance party, when they should have traveled with the president himself. Why? It's because they gave a reason why they have to be there earlier. And the motivation is that is the way the public service survives. They survive through workshops. In fact, there have been about 4 or 5 pronouncements about cutting down on workshops. No more training outside town. Use the boardrooms to train. These have been made 4 times within 24 months, within 2 years. Nothing has happened. If you go to Mike Convention Center right now, or you go to Sandy's Creation, or you go to Twangale right now, you will find there are 6, 7 workshops in one venue, all of them public service.
Wow.
Statutory bodies, right? I'm not exaggerating, because that's what we do. And I said, but look, the pronouncement has been made, and they choose areas which are a little out of the business sense because it qualifies for an allowance. They are out of town, but within the town. and for the reason that they still get an allowance. Okay, so to cut and change that culture, it takes years, it takes discipline, it takes focus, and at times the head of state may have to say, I'm ready to be unpopular among the people who work for me, because they won't accept it. Even when he made that pronouncement, I knew they were simply saying, we are just giving you a little time, Your Excellency. Very soon you understand why these things happen. So to live within means within government is a cultural issue, it's our habits, it's inherited legacy issues which are difficult to manage right now because they have been embedded as part of the way we do things here. So to really answer your question, it's an issue of saying how do we therefore live within means by expanding one part of the equation, which is the revenue side. Keep the costs the way they are, because it is difficult to cut down on the cost that people are already used to. Once you increase the salaries of staff, just the 12%, by the way, the 12% increment for civil servants, which was announced recently, has a very huge impact on pension and retirement benefits already, completely. And it has worsened the situation of the debt, domestic debt of government, how much the obligations that government has for the domestic creditors. So I will tell you something, that unless we continue to grow the economy at large, and until the revenues of the ZRA grow from 60 billion per year or 70 billion per year to 300 per year to match with the demand side, we won't manage. But finally, which is a very big point to answer the question, there is also another cost that's making it difficult to live within means. I think this has been a song being sung many times. 45% of our revenues go to debt, external debt servicing. 45%.
Wow.
And the other percentage, about 50%, is already casting stone expense for emoluments, for salaries of civil servants. These you can't cut down. So you are remaining bare about 10% to meet the needs of the hospitals for medicine, to meet the free education that government has promised, to meet the social services, including the social cost transfers. So under those circumstances, you find that government has to borrow nearly about 42 billion this year alone to meet the debt servicing and also the other local needs. That is now living above means because of the external debt requirements.
Right.
In short, Mr. Kanyama, what you're saying is that the ability for a country to live within its means can only be possible if economic activities are enhanced, local production is increased, and all these other things, because then that's the only way that as a country we'll be able to generate our own massive revenues. But provided we keep depending upon external factors, it's difficult. Like you're saying, legacy. And
Yeah, exactly the point. I mean, that's use your personal level expenses at family level. There are many of us who live above means. We are in debt. Oh, you'll be shocked how many phone calls I receive. There was a time I put an analogy. I was trying to explain the IMF on my Facebook page, and that post went viral. I think I was using the example of IMF, a creditor, somebody speaking on your behalf. Okay, my creditor, then you get. So I used the story of how I helped one lady who was in village banking and was in debt distress. That I ended up being the endorser, the credibility guy to stand in for this lady. And some people took that story seriously. That week, I had a lot of phone calls from people who are in huge debt distress out of village banking. I tell you, it's a huge crisis for some of the people. This is what we call living beyond means. People who are borrowing money every month. Now, the only way I answer people, one, try to cut down costs, yes, manage, but it takes practice. It takes practice to learn how to start eating kapenta. I ate kapenta for supper myself yesterday. I ate porridge this morning with groundnuts this morning. I ate kapenta cake for lunch. This evening, I'm just waiting for this program to finish. I look forward. I'm eating offals with Nshima. You know offals with beans.
Yes. Matum.
That's about an amazing meal you're going to be having, though. Could I take you back to the IMF bit, because you touched on the IMF, so I might as well come in and it's quite an emotive topic at the moment in Zambia, but I really would like to have your perspectives, especially objectively, on how best you can break down the conditions that Zambia has agreed to. And I say this to recognize the fact that it's not that it's being done to Zambia, but it's Zambia and the IMF agreeing to those conditions together. And also what the strategic key markers and timelines we should be looking out for to determine viability of those conditions.
Right. I will really say thank you. There are no real IMF conditionalities per se. I won't really call them conditionalities of the IMF. They are just agreements of what government should be doing on its own. And these are things that government itself could have done even without IMF coming on board. What happened with this particular program? And this is the major difference between the IMF of today and the IMF that people are talking about. There was an IMF of 1990s, and everybody's referring to the IMF of 1990s. Now, the IMF of the 1990s was hugely demanding. This was the one which was coming to the table and say, you do this or otherwise you won't get the money. You do this or otherwise you won't get the money. Now, IMF learned a huge lesson out of that experience. And the major lesson came after the 1998-1997 Asian crisis. And IMF realized they messed up the crisis. Their advice failed in Asia. And their advice enhanced much more damage to those economies. So IMF changed its outlook. And one of the pieces of work I did was called IMF Opinion Global Survey, which I led, but it was done by an independent research institution called GlobeScan. GlobeScan is in Canada. I think Mr. Roger Charlie, who is here, knows about GlobeScan. They are based in Canada. Yeah. So, and we gave the feedback, perceptions globally, which I led with a consultant. And then we told the board, this is what people don't want, this is what people want. So it has been a process of change from the 1990s to date. And some of the changes that the IMF has done which is very critical, and this is very, very critical. It ensures that the country to undergo a program should propose its own conditionalities. So the country should be able to say, this is what we want to achieve. So you agree with the IMF, and one of the things that you should agree with a country is the level of, for example, what level of inflation do you want to achieve over a period of time? What level of debt do you want to achieve? Debt exposure do you want to achieve over a period of time? What level of fiscal deficit do you seek to achieve over a period of time? Once you have agreed on those key benchmarks, that these are the ones we must aim for, and the IMF agrees with those benchmarks, then the IMF will say, how will you reach there? Can you propose to us how you reach there? They will never tell you that, can you cut down on education? They will never tell you that, can you cut down on medicines? They will never tell you, can you sell parastatals? They will never tell you now. They will simply say, what will help you reach there? You as a country should propose to the IMF, these are the measures we are going to undertake. Number one, we want to rationalize contraction of debt. We want to accrue more debt without discussing with you, and we only accrue debt which helps us pay more other debt. So we shall restructure the debt. Number two, we will rationalize procurement system. This is one of the things, by the way, that IMF has talked about, corruption and procurement system. We want to ensure that procurement, this is where we have been losing money as a country, and procurement shall be much more transparent. That's why 2 weeks ago you heard the ZPPA announcing that there is no more what do they call it? There is where you no objection. There's no objection by ZPPA, because the no objection was the vehicle used by politicians and private sector and whatever to prioritize their preferred companies, where they will say there's no other supplier for this product. And this thing is so urgent, we can't go to the market. It's so urgent, we need this guy to deliver tomorrow, very urgent. So we cannot tender, time is gone. So they write ZPPA to authorize that company to supply without tender, by saying it's the only company that can supply, we know, which has got these specifications, is the only company that can supply now because agent. And ZPPA will simply say, okay, no objection. From 2 weeks ago, that is scrapped. And this is the government of Zambia, which discussed and agreed with the IMF. We want to bring more transparency in the procurement, because this is where we have been losing money. And we shall also look at parastatals that are non-performing. We shall rationalize the procurement of fuel. It was not IMF, it was the government of Zambia that said, we feel we can save money here by rationalizing fuel. We think that by refining our own fuel is far more expensive than getting finished fuel. So that's why you saw ministers, including Minister of Finance, going to Indeni. We shall absorb all these 300 employees and we shall not retrench anybody, but we want to turn the pipeline of Tazama into a pipeline, not for crude oil, but for finished fuel. Of course, that has been discussed with Tanzania, because they call on Tazama for the change of usage. But these are some of the things that you have been hearing about.
Right.
There are conditionalities. Yes, they may appear like conditionalities, but this is the Zambian government that went to the IMF to reach this benchmark. These are the measures we want to undertake on our own. So in a nutshell, I would really not call these as benchmarks. They simply agreed on the benchmarks that must be achieved.
So then, as we take a commercial break here, we need to move away from this thing of saying the IMF is demanding this, the IMF is demanding this. Why do politicians keep lying to us? Let's take a commercial break.
Do you want to promote your business on Zambia Broad Talk Radio? Yes, that's right. Live on Zambia Broad Talk Radio. To book your spot, just make a donation by picking from the following categories. To get started, just call or WhatsApp the number on the screen and you'll be good to go. Live on Zambia Broad Talk Radio every Saturday for 1 full month. And it will stay on the recorded shows.
Sorry about that. The information is those who want to, your products, company, whatever you're doing to be, for us to showcase what you're doing, the information is scrolling at the bottom there, and you can follow up on that. I don't know if anybody had a follow-up question to what Mr. Kanyama just raised on the IMF. Roger, anything, or you want to go a certain direction?
I've got my own question. Welcome. You are a coach for the young people. And we, the adults, the Zambians, I don't know if it's an African disease, we cannot invest long. We don't think long term. What do we do to begin encouraging ourselves that time is your best friend when it comes to investing? That's my question, actually.
Yeah. Investing long-term and short-term, again, is about value systems. It's about culture. Some of you have been exposed out there, and you know how our colleagues plan for holidays. They don't just say, let me fly to Africa, to Seychelles tomorrow. They plan. And I'm sure that where you are, you've been able to see that the people there earn just as much as you and me earn in terms of salaries. When you look at in terms of purchasing power parity, we earn almost the same, almost, because the cost compared to the salary as a ratio, you find that we're almost the same. But they still manage their lives far, far better than we do. And one of those things is because of how they have managed the pressures. One is that the governments in Europe, for example, where you are, they absorb a lot of the social pressures of the people. So the obligation on the individual are purely to pay their taxes and to meet their own needs without the pressures of the extended family. And I'm using the word the extended family. Just the time we have said the discussion, I'm not exaggerating, just within the last, I don't know how many minutes we've been talking, I have had 3 texts here from my cousins, 3, asking for money to pay school fees, asking for money for this, asking for money, my mother is not well, for hospital, for that. And under those kind of pressures, how do you plan for long term? You yourself want to plan for long term. You are putting money for long term. You're budgeting for your children for long term. But you've got a certain family that doesn't believe in that. They believe that you are the long term. You are their insurance. So I must move money from what I plan to invest in the future to meet a short-term need right now. So to answer that question, therefore, it requires decisiveness among us, changing our priorities, our value systems, and things that matter the most. I have personally made very hard decisions to invest long time. And I'm surprised these cousins are phoning me because in fact, even their communication is very interesting. They're saying, if you're in a position to do so, because they understand, I have communicated to everybody that I don't want your lack of planning to affect my planning. They knew their children would be in school this time, but they never thought about it, that the schools will open in January, in February, because they knew that there will be somebody out there we can install phone, and I will not. And they know that I can't. And once we will tell people and communicate to the extended family what you can do and what you cannot do, it will help inculcate a culture that is future focused, that tells them that money is planned for, and you earn it not now, you earn it out of planning and focus.
That's true.
My children, 2 of my children go to schools that are very expensive, but I don't struggle. I paid 2 months before the due date. Why? Because I knew a year earlier I need this money at this particular point in time. Long-term planning. I know that I knew, you had missed that what I discussed. I knew in 2006 that by 2017, my firstborn son would be graduating from university. And I incorporated Bridges Limited to plan for the future. My son, another son, is working in South Africa. He says, look, let me work. I said, fantastic. But at least you want to blame me that I didn't create a job for you. You can work there. My third-born son is doing 3rd year at university in HR. And on organogram, there is already a position you haven't filled for her. When she finishes next year, she just comes in. It's future planning. It's a cultural issue. It's an issue of exposure. It's an issue where you and I who are exposed must transmit to all members of our own families to begin to plan for their own children. And some of them are saying, you are having 10 children because you know there's Chibamba Kanyama who can feed them. I want. You have to look after your own children. So the moment you say no, and the moment we begin to say no with love, and of course we're not just refusing, we support our family members. I support for their fertilizer every year, and not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6. I support 10, 12. Why? Because I plan for them. Every year I know that this year, 2022, in October, they will need fertilizer. I already begin to plan for them and work for that capital. So whether we invest, in fact, my other kid with the last born child, he doesn't have shares in the stock market because since he was born 2009, there has not been any big listing on the stock market. So him doesn't have shares on the stock market. The others get dividends, which they use for their school. But for the last one, I said, let me get an insurance policy. I got this insurance policy, which matches the time he turns 18. By the time he turns 18, the policy with Madison Life would have matured. And he'll get his money for university wherever he wants to go. So this is a cultural thing. We should take advantage of our exposures. And I'm happy we got a lot of Zambians out there in Europe. And this is what I'm asking you to do. We are not asking you to be sending money to us here every day to support us. We want you to transmit those values you are learning which are working well. Others are not working well. We want to accept them. But there are some in England that Tandy is exposed to. Share. We want you to write books of what you have been exposed to. Send them to us and we'll send them to the schools and share with them what works well so that our young children can begin to know about investing in the future and thinking about the future. So that when Tandy writes a book, a young girl will know, actually I can dream big. Actually, it's not about sleeping with a boy and becoming pregnant today. I have to invest first of all in my education, get a better job, and then I find a man who wants to marry me. Not now. So I think that's the best way I can answer the question.
well answered. You've just told me I need to open an account for fertilizer. I never knew that. I love it.
It's true.
I love it. We are always paying, even school fees for our relatives. We are always paying as an emergency, but we know they will be coming. I love it. Thank you so much.
Here is the thing. To that point, Mr. Kanyama, everybody is applauding on social media here about you saying that. Therefore, that goes to the issue of us, especially living in the diaspora, with the issue to do with life insurance. Okay? We have a problem with that, and it's like immediately you begin to talk a different language of, please people, let's do away Nama GoFundMe. You are insensitive and all those kind of things. So basically what you're saying is it's a cultural issue. There are so many comments and a lot of questions here. Ms. Tandy Kasuluba, I don't know what you think. There are so many questions and comments taking us back to the IMF. I don't know what you want us to do with it.
Shall we come back to the IMF one when we've gone through some other questions that we wanted to ask?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. Go ahead, please.
So, Mr. Kanyama, I hope you got a chance to see that I had asked a question on universal basic income. So I just want to present it to you again in person now. I wondered whether you think that policies such as a UBI, it's becoming more popular in conversation. And do you think that that can transform our broken economy? And does it have potential in Zambia, given that we've had micropilots in Namibia, Kenya, now Malawi, South Africa?
Which one? Which one is this one?
Universal basic income, UBI.
Can you define it for me? Maybe I don't understand it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, no, not to worry. So it's a payment that's given to everybody in a country, residents or citizens. So there's a case to be made for whether people should just be residents of a country or citizens of a country that would be paid that. And it can be paid through taxes. There are different ways that are being proposed, whether through minerals, global commons, etc. And everybody gets entitled. So it's an unconditional payment. It's not one that elevates you economically to say you're going to live a luxurious life, but it just takes everybody up from the poverty floor just a little bit. So you can actually be empowered to go back to school if you're needing to, be empowered to have the most basic needs.
I think for me, there are two things. The first one is, do we have capacity to do that as a country? Look at our GDP. Our GDP is just $27 billion around there. And it's an income the country makes. The whole, this is not about the budget for the government. This is the total wealth that gets created every year by different producers. This is the total wealth we create. And to put it in context, really, it's just a little fraction of a city in the USA where you are, in their locality. That's their budget, a locality, a small locality. For us, it's the wealth, not the budget, but the wealth that we create as a country. Mm-hmm. And it's from that wealth that we generate the budget. So about 21% of that wealth, we tap it as a budget for the country. It's not even enough. That's why you have to go again and borrow and beg out there, because not even enough to meet the needs. And from that little cake we have, you want again to pay people. That's my challenge here, because the income is so low that we are not in a position to pay. I would support, the second thing is, I would support the existing measure if it is done transparently, which has been done, and IMF has strongly supported it. Two things the IMF has supported: social cash transfer.
Okay.
This, by the way, is an IMF World Bank initiative.
Yeah.
It's not really engineered by our own government. Social cash transfer exists, and it's a conditionality. It's an IMF conditionality to a program. That to effect a program in any country, like the credit facility, the enhanced credit facility, you must have an effective, transparent social cash transfer. Yeah. Number two, you want to invest in education. So I sat with an IMF lady on the program who is part of the team, and I said, we had coffee together, and says, Chibamba, one thing we'll never do is to influence and disagree with government what they want to do with education. Because education is the future of Zambia. It's an investment. Personally, I believe that, like many people have said, education is the best equalizer. Education is the one which eradicates poverty. Education increases the power of leverage for citizens. The reason we are having so many high levels of poverty today is because, number one, we got very poor families who haven't been to school. And when I look at them and I go to the village, I'm able to see that this poverty will continue for the next 30 years, because I can already see the kids, the little kids are not in school. Then the other problem is, even those who have been to school, we have educated them, maybe the complete education exposure. We are grooming people to work, and that is the way our education system is structured. We are grooming people to work. So we are having about 13% of people unemployed, okay, in terms of unemployment rate from the labor force, labor market. Now, many people who should be entrepreneurs are not employing. So we are all dependent on a few parastatals, a few multinational organizations, and government to employ us. And therefore, people are graduating from university, they are not able to be absorbed into the market. So it should be a chain reactions about the total picture of where we should be investing our money. So I don't know whether I've answered your question on this one, but all I'll say is I think the current mechanism is sufficient. Invest in social cash transfer for those who are not able to fend for themselves. These are old people in the villages, our grandmothers, and also education, given the size of our cake.
Okay. No, absolutely. You've absolutely done it. And I think when you touched on social cash transfers, you've got as close as possible to what people in the universal basic income world would be seeing as a form of a pilot, but on the unconditional one, because there are two types of those. So thank you so much for that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. We are not afraid to face or answer anything on this forum. I don't know that you can see that comment from Honorable Brian Mundubilek. We are not afraid to respond to anything here. You live in fantasy, you can plan, but there is poverty here. Your comment, Mr. Kanyama?
I plan myself. Every year we plan. And we have been able to move people out of poverty. One of the people I've involved in planning is my nephew, Caesar. And I have another nephew, Hakapali. Hakapali runs the mouse tracking those tracks. That's our nephew. I gave a little seed some years ago. A cousin, rather, is a cousin. His mother is the younger to my mother. He is now doing great. Out of planning. It's not a fantasy. It's out of planning. I have used my own planning to induce values within my extended family members. My own nephew, Caesar, this is not exaggeration. Caesar is now, you go to Chikankata, people know him. He just came to Lusaka to buy another vehicle for himself. He owns a property where all doctors, teachers are renting off Caesar. Out of planning. And I'm proud of it. Because I teach values. And those who follow them, they are succeeding. And I'm not talking in fantasy, because I can point to individuals who have done well. If we can inculcate values among those we consider poor, it can change the whole structure. That's why some of us exist. And we are volunteering to offer services to people. We spend time, I've gone to the villages and speaking in Nyanja. When I speak in Nyanja, people laugh with my Nyanja, and I drink water I bought because I struggle, but I speak. I've gone to Kanyama compound, I've gone to Jazanga free of charge. The churches invite me there to talk to those we call poor people. And I speak in their language. Begin to help them with values, what you can support, what you cannot support, living within your means. How do you manage your relatives? How do you manage this? How do you manage it? And from that poverty, they're beginning to grow. So these are real things. We can only change the landscape of our poverty if we tackle people and face them and begin to talk to them and say, this is why I went to school, and I want to help you what you can begin to do. Begin to plan. If you don't have money, at least you can plan to enable the one who supports you to plan for you. There's nothing expensive about asking your sponsor that I'll need money for my child in October this year. Can you plan for me? You're not spending any money. You are simply enabling your sponsor to plan for you. You're not spending any money. Oh, I'm telling you that let those who feel that they are poor not just go to those who have got money. Tomorrow my child is going to school, I need money. You must plan for your begging, for your support. Plan it that I'm going to need money 9 months from now. At least you should be able to know what you need 9 months from now. You cannot be too poor not even to know what you need 9 months from now. I don't think so.
Thank you. That was quite insightful and very impassioned. I'll circle back to the IMF context, and we've had a question from Mr. Emmanuel Zulu. He says, Mr. Kanyama, is there a case study we can use to confirm any positive outcome of so-called new IMF intervention in an economy which was or is facing a debt crisis like Zambia?
There are some. Zambia is one case. You can Google Zambia is one of the good case studies because the most recent. Zambia is the most recent, which you will see the benchmarks how everything dropped within a 3-year cycle of the IMF program. So you can Google Zambia. Most of inflation, interest rates, everything within a 3-year period, how they all dropped and the economy began to grow. It will show you the growth rate because it's one of those great case studies. Now, the issue here about IMF, I want people to understand the IMF issue. It's not an easy path. It's not an easy path. And the analogy I like using about IMF is that IMF is like acupuncture. One doctor at UTH responded to a question, why is it that people who go for acupuncture, most of them don't survive? And why is it that they all die? And the doctor responded, said, no, okay, some survive, many survive. But then he says, the problem is that when we go to acupuncture, the person is already in a critical condition. So the survival chances are already low. When countries go on an IMF program, they're in dire trials, they're in a serious economic crisis. And survival is never 100%. IMF is like an ambulance. It only gives you comfort that at least there's some medication going on while somebody's undergoing real treatment. IMF is never the real thing. IMF simply stabilizes you so that you can get into the proper medication later. To stabilize you with your blood injection, stabilize your temperature. But it's not the treatment. So the chances of survival are never guaranteed because they are getting into you when you are sick. It's a crisis. So the treatment may not apply much. So at the end of the day, people will be saying the IMF is bad, nobody survives. It's just because you went too late. This IMF program started when I was taught at IMF, by the way. I was there, and I have all the documentation on the same laptop I'm using here. It's all here, sitting here. What we call the back to office reports, which are very confidential. Zambia's crisis was diagnosed in 2015. And they began to advise that, can you do this health check? Like a doctor telling you, can you keep your weight low? Keep your weight low. You are too heavy. You'll be attacked by heart disease. Behave on your debt contraction. They began to advise Zambia 2015. We didn't listen to the IMF. That wasn't the program. It was what is called Article 4 advice. free advice called a health check. We didn't listen. Now, when you are sick, you go to them, now, doctor, I need an they'll come and amputate you. So it's never guaranteed. It's a painful program. So I should say it's a very painful program. Zambia, by the way, in fact, one good case study is that this is documented. Zambia was on an IMF program between 2006 and 2011. 2006 and 2011. Twice, we borrowed money from the IMF and Zambia paid back. Zambians don't know about it. Why? It's because we have not been exposed to the Euro bond. The reason there's so much noise now about IMF and everything is because we have been exposed to the Euro bond. Now the people who own them, they are now very sensitive. They are now angry. They want us to pay them back. I'm shocked that Zambia became so desperate that we were borrowing from individuals as a country, borrowing from individuals.
Wow.
People, individuals, a country. And then now you want to blame the IMF for that mismanagement? I don't think so. I wonder how worse it will be with the IMF if we made the situation so worse for ourselves. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's conclude, Kasuluba.
Yeah, well said, Mr. Kanyama. Even as we're coming to a conclusion, let's now maybe talk about your book. What can people expect from the upcoming Business Values, the upcoming publication for your book, Business Values for Our Time, and what inspired the book?
Thank you so much. This book, Business Value for Our Time, is an expanded version of the first book, which was it was launched in 2010. And it talked about Zambian tribes, part one, Zambian tribes, and it raised some controversy around the tribes, on the Luvale, not others, but just on the Luvale side.
I've actually read that one.
Sorry?
I've actually read that one.
You read that one. The only difference is that the one who did the review mentioned the things that were not in the book. Okay. So people were acting on a review, not on what was contained in the book. So what we have done this time, it's an expanded edition. It has, about, I would say, 55% of the materials in the book is not there anymore. It has been completely revised, totally revised. But on the tribes, we have expanded them. In that book, there were just sections. Now there are chapters on their own and very fairly researched. So I contracted people from each of those tribes and ethnic groups and to work with me per the chapter to make sure that the facts are correct. And we have added one tribe, the Lunda, which was not there. It's now there, very authentic, very interesting. So we have revised the book. The foreword is done by Mr. Marco Daniel, and my editor is Professor Nixon Banda, not Faxon. Many people confuse with Faxon, the journalist, but him is an economist. So what you should expect is a book that helps entrepreneurs not to run businesses for money, but to run businesses for the future. Because there's a difference. Many Zambian entrepreneurs, by the way, we have made it a global book this time. It's a global book. So I'm trying to help Zambia, any entrepreneur, know that there's a difference between making money and running a business. Many of the people are actually just making money. That's why they're in tender, the money comes, they buy a Benz, they do what. After 2 years, the change of government, the business goes down. Okay? But we're talking about building a business. What values are necessary for you to build a business for the future?
So is it already, when is it going to be launched? And it will be available on Amazon, right?
It will be available on Amazon. The typesetting is being undertaken now, so the typesetter is putting together for Amazon, so that by first March, we have printers already in Cape Town. We are going to do the printing. We've already arranged for a transporter. They will be transported to Joburg, and the transporter, a friend of mine, Dr. Nama, will fetch them from South Africa to bring them to Zambia, so that the first week, 7th week of April, we are launching it.
Excellent. Vadala twalumba kapati, but before you go,
thank you.
Before you go, we agreed we were going to talk about the Africa Cup of Nations before we go. So, what's your prediction? Who wins tomorrow? It's tomorrow, right? Senegal or Egypt?
First of all, the only reason I can go for Egypt is because they've got an Arsenal player there. Okay, there's an Arsenal. Elneny is an Arsenal player, so that's the only. However, I want Senegal to win it this time. They have really tried hard over the many years without winning that. So I would love Senegal to win the Africa Cup Nations for 2021, though it's being played 2022.
It's being played in 2020. Mr. Kanyama, we do thank you so much for taking the time. I know people wanted you to dwell more on the IMF, but we shall arrange another time for you to come on. Tell my sister when I'm in Lusaka, I'll come for my Chibwantu.
And we shall prepare for you Chibwantu. And I'm just going to eat. I'm cooking okra daily myself, and of course there's beans and offals. What is supper for tonight?
Oh, my offals are my favorite. Thank you so much,
and that's how we killed us.
Always appreciate you taking the time to be here, Tandy.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Yes, thanks everybody for tuning in. Coming up is Open Forum. Don't go away. Thanks again, Mr. Kanyama.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.